Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Anna Palmer, CEO and one of the founders of Punchbowl News. Thank you so much for joining us on this live stream for this virtual conversation this morning. I am thrilled to be joined by Senator Ron Wyden, the Democrat from Oregon and chair of the Senate Finance Committee, who's going to be joining me for a one-on-one conversation about the importance of privacy and security in new and existing technologies. A big thank you to Trusted Future for sponsoring this three-part series, Building Trust in Technology. Afterward, I'll be joined for a fireside chat with Trusted Future Advisory Board member Daniel Weitzner. Just a reminder, you can find Punchbowl News on all social media platforms at Punchbowl News, and we encourage you to share about today's event. And with that, I'd like to welcome Senator Wyden to the virtual stage. Senator Wyden?
Anna, thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. All right, we're going to kick this off as we always do with a few news of the day questions, and then we'll get into the substance and the topic at hand. No surprise here. We are going to talk about government funding. Do you think this is going to get wrapped up before Christmas?
I believe we've made some headway in the last day, obviously. My hope is that the little bit of extra time can give us a chance, particularly to deal with these tax questions. You mentioned my chairmanship of the Senate Finance Committee in a way that is fair and gives the country and the people who make up the country the chance to get ahead. And in particular, the Republicans have been interested in some business tax breaks. They made some mistakes in that 2017 tax bill and they never corrected it. And particularly, they're interested in the restoration of the research and development tax credit. I'm very supportive of it. Yesterday, I came from Oregon at our business summit. I pledged again to push for it. I also feel very strongly about the child tax credit. And I think that is an opportunity for a 1-2 punch that will better America. We'll have healthy kids. I tell the businesses, you need healthy workers at your businesses.
So let me just follow up on that because that was going to be my next question. Without the child tax credit, will there be a tax extenders package? And how optimistic are you that a tax extenders package could actually happen?
Senate Democrats aren't going there. I mean, this is a question, it seems to me, right at the heart of our priorities. I've made it very clear I don't take a backseat to anybody in encouraging research and development and innovation. I spoke about it at length yesterday in Oregon at our leadership summit. I also don't take a backseat to anybody into going to bat for kids. Child tax credit is pretty much Social Security for kids. And I think the two complement each other. Business wants some tax breaks. I think research makes sense. Kids deserve this tax break as well. Let's put the two of them together, take some steps that are good for the country.
All right, last news of the day question. Kyrsten Sinema recently switched her party affiliation to independent, surprising some folks. How much do you think does that impact Democrats going into next year in the Senate?
Yeah, you have to put it into perspective. First of all, we have independents, Bernie Sanders, Angus King. Senator Sinema wants her committee assignment, so she's clearly going to have to cooperate with Democrats. So we'll see how Arizona politics shakes out. But we've got a lot of important work to do. And what I always say is I will work with anybody who gives us a chance in our country to have policies that give everybody an opportunity to succeed. I've made it clear that I want billionaires, for example, to be successful, but I think something's out of whack if they go for years and years with paying little or no taxes.
All right, let's get to the topic of the day, the importance of privacy and security in new technologies. You have done extensive work on this front, so we're going to hit a bunch of different topics because there's a lot happening in this space. But I first want to start out in the post-Dobbs decision. That has put a lot of focus on privacy of medical data for women. How do you think overturning Roe versus Wade has impacted privacy?
It is a cataclysmic decision with respect to women's rights. It's pretty clear to me, Anna. Some on the far right really would like to engage in what I call uterus surveillance. I mean, for all practical purposes, they would like to see women's personal data weaponized. If they're going to see Planned Parenthood, if they're going to see other programs that assist them with their reproductive choices. People on the far right would like to get that information. They couple it with location tracking opportunities, and you can really send a chilling message to people who just would like to exercise what, in my view, is a fundamental right to privacy. And I go way back on this. When I was a member of the House of Representatives, I had the first hearings with respect to abortion medicines. So these are fundamental choices, and we're going to pull out all the stops to protect women's rights. I'm very proud to be working with Mazie Hirono and Sarah Jacobs over in the House on the Your Body, Your Data legislation. Again, because I saw the second Alito came out with that draft opinion, women are going to have their personal data weaponized against them.
I want to talk one more question on privacy here. Tech policy is kind of largely left unaddressed thus far. A lot of issues when it comes to privacy, and companies are making their own choices, whether to encrypt data, for instance, or not. How concerned are you about the piecemeal approach? And do you have any, kind of optimism that there could be a larger privacy package?
First of all, Anna, let's make sure everybody understands what's on the line here. Privacy is the essential condition for a thriving internet ecosystem. It just comes down to being that basic, because privacy is key to free speech, it's key to commerce, it's key to protection from bad actors, for example, who prey on users. And what this debate has always been about, Anna, is the users. The corporations, government, all of these other parties that have an interest are engaging in policies that users are now very troubled about, because privacy is such a fundamental right. It's what abortion has always been about, the fundamental right to privacy. When I was the first to come out for marriage equality, I said that too was a fundamental right to privacy. And my first sentence is, if you don't like gay marriage, don't get one. So these are fundamental issues with respect to privacy.
Let's talk Section 230. It's a bill that's gotten a lot.
Who wrote that bill, Anna?
You co-wrote it. So I feel like you are the right person to come to with this question. It's gotten a lot of focus. Some critics say it's too broad, it overreaches. Is 230 going to happen? Is it dead? Where do you see that going?
Well, first of all, Anna, Clarence Thomas and Donald Trump have been gunning for 230 for a long, long time. I don't think Donald Trump would know Section 230 if it hit him in the head. But the fact is, what he wanted to do is force, for example, social media platforms to print his lies about vote by mail. 230 and the First Amendment are fundamental opportunities for us to protect speech. And particularly, what 230 has done is make it possible to green light so much user-generated content. If you look at all of the interesting stuff on the web, not the slime and the hate, because we try to deal with that by the moderating provisions in Section 230, but the interesting stuff on the net comes from important voices who probably wouldn't get into traditional papers and wouldn't get into TV. So Chris Cox, he and I are the authors of the legislation. There's a whole book about it called The 36 Words That Created the Internet. And we always laugh about it and say, no, we're not Al Gore today. Excuse me, 26. I've just been corrected by the staff. 26 words that created the Internet. Chris Cox and I are now filing a brief with the Supreme Court to defend it. And Anna, the most important thing is, the big guys can always buy opportunities for speech. What I'm concerned about is Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. Those are the voices that have a chance to have a big forum because of Section 230.
I want to talk about China. It's an area where a lot of Democrats and Republicans are actually kind of coming together. How worried are you about American data being accessed by unfriendly nations? Is there anything that Congress can do?
There is. And Senator Marco Rubio and I have authored legislation. He is a senior Republican on the Intelligence Committee. I'm on the Intelligence Committee as well, to restrict people's personal data in America being shipped there. And for example, you can get into all kinds of questions. You ban TikTok and the like. You're missing the forest for the trees. I mean, The question is, are we going to make it tougher to ship Americans' personal data to China? And by the way, Anna, I heard you say you wanted to talk about next year. I'm going after these data brokers next year. These are some of the sleaziest characters, around, with basically no rules. And they get women's data with respect. You asked about Dobbs. They get data with respect to business and healthcare and the like. And by the way, at one of an open Intelligence Committee hearings, we actually got on the record that people in the field think that privacy is a national security interest as well.
Yeah, I mean, talk about that. I mean, you mentioned TikTok, right? That's a company that a lot of your colleagues have been pretty critical on. Where do you stand on TikTok and its use and its place in America?
Well, I'm troubled by TikTok. I'm not going to get into anything classified because I'm on the Intelligence Committee. I just want people to understand, if you ban TikTok, that doesn't mean people's personal data is safe from China, because you'll have, into that void, these sleazy data brokers go and they'll get people's data, they leech it up, and off it goes.
You talk about kind of what's looking forward, which is something we are at the end of the year. So if you look back on this year, there has been some pretty big technology pieces of legislation, CHIPS Plus, for instance, some other provisions, and certainly in terms of the infrastructure bill in the first 2 years of the Biden administration. We're going into a different chapter, right? That's going to be a divided Washington. Are there things in this space that you think actually can get done, or is it more of setting the groundwork for the next time it's an all Democratic Washington?
And you can have bipartisan cooperation in this field. First, in the new session, I'm going to really push my Fourth Amendment is not for sale. That's something that has strong Republican support in both the Senate and the House. I've seen some of the leadership in the House, the new Republican leadership, say that they're very interested in it. If anybody's going to take a position of influence with respect to protecting privacy, it ought to be the government. And the way these data brokers and others scoop up people's information without warrants is outrageous. The other point I'll mention, because I know you're on a time clock, is people like Steve Daines. Steve Daines and I have worked together on browsing history. Who would be Jerry Moran and I have worked for years on these questions, have a big project now with respect to declassification. You ask again about people's privacy. We've got to get this right. And Avril Haines recently wrote me and said that the classification system today is so broken that it is hurting national security. It's not just a privacy issue, it's a national security issue.
All right, last question for you, sir. We haven't talked about the biggest figure right now driving a ton of the news in this area, Elon Musk, the future of Twitter, kind of reinstating the former president and many other controversial figures as part of his new ownership of the company. What's your take on what's happening there? Do you think Elon Musk needs to come to the Hill and testify about what's happening at Twitter?
Yeah, I think it certainly would be good to have him testify. I've been on 2 red-eye flights in the last 4 days, Anna, going home and visiting with folks at home. So I haven't read everything in the Twitter files. But let's talk about what I think we know. It looks to me like most of what is going on is people are there, these employees, and they're trying to figure out what to host and what to downrank. That's what it looks like is going on. And as far as Mr. Musk is concerned, I'm struck by the fact that the way he has handled his ex-employees sure has generated a lot of heat for him, because I saw all those people booing when he was out on the West Coast.
All right. So that is something we will watch for. Musk here testifying on Capitol Hill.
Let's do it again, Anna. And I see you've got my buddy Danny. He and I went through all of the big battles: internet tax, Section 230, digital signatures. I had the chance to show up in the Senate when basically nobody knew how to use a computer except Pat Leahy and Patty Murray. And John McCain just gave me a great opportunity to work with them. And Danny was in on all of it. So y'all have a great show. And let's do this again, okay?
Thanks so much, Senator Wyden. Really appreciate your time this morning. Anna. All right. And with that, before we get to my conversation with Danny, we have a message from our sponsor, Trusted Futures.
technology is helping advance an incredible world. We're getting smarter, healthier, and more connected because innovation is pushing us forward. But still, we worry. We worry about our privacy online. We worry about our digital security. And we worry about what the future might look like. But there's something that can bridge the gap and enable even better opportunities tomorrow. Trust. Trust in the innovations that will help our economy thrive. Trust in the tools that our doctors will use to treat us. Trust in the technology that teachers will use to connect with our kids. And trust in the devices we'll hold to shop, learn, share, and connect. A better, healthier, more equitable future for everyone is possible when we're able to trust the technology that will power it. Trusted software, trusted hardware, trusted platforms, trusted services. Together, we can build a more trusted future. Join us.
All right, now I'd like to welcome Daniel Weitzner for a fireside chat. He's on the advisory board of Trusted Future. Welcome, sir.
Thanks. Great to be here.
You certainly got a ringing endorsement from Senator Wyden. So for those of you, for those in our audience rather, that are not familiar with kind of your role, your background, your work with him and other senators, maybe give us just a 30,000 viewpoint of kind of your history on these types of issues.
Sure. It's always so inspiring to hear Senator Wyden. I will admit that I think of him as Representative Wyden from Portland, Oregon. That's when he did Section 230 with Chris Cox and others. And, so that was in 1995, 96. The internet was a really new idea for people. It was very exciting. It was kind of making its way out of the proverbial Silicon Valley garage and university labs into the public. I was with the Center for Democracy and Technology at the time, and I would say that Senator Wyden and Representative Cox and Senator Leahy and others, Conrad Burns, a whole kind of cast of characters, kind of saved the internet in its infancy from what I think would have been a very destructive set of kind of censorship regulations. Unfortunately, the first exposure that a lot of people, and the first exposure that Congress had to the internet, was as a kind of a venue for kids to get access to pornography. And if you paid attention to certain press portrayals, you would have thought it was just kind of a cesspool. From a free speech perspective and from a perspective of making the most of technology innovation, we were very concerned to help the internet develop so that, as Senator Wyden said, it could really be a venue for access to a diversity of information, for more people to speak, for people who didn't have the opportunity to get onto the kind of broadcast airwaves and into the mainstream press to speak. And part of the reason why the internet attracted such bipartisan interest from the beginning is that, not to cast aspersions on anyone, there were a bunch of conservatives who felt that they were kind of shut out from the so-called mainstream media, and they looked at the internet as this fantastic opportunity to get their word out. Progressives on the other side saw it as just a very powerful mechanism for speech in general, and I think a lot of people looked at it as a platform for innovation. So my work originally was about bringing a civil liberties perspective to the emerging internet environment, trying to understand what were going to be the right ingredients for a regulatory structure that would help the internet to grow, both from an economic development standpoint and also from a free speech and privacy perspective.
So we've certainly seen the democratization of information, everybody kind of latching on. It's kind of always amazing. It's not that long ago, what you're talking about, 95, 96, yeah. Right? To how ubiquitous it is today and part of all parts of our lives. The senator and I spoke about privacy. That's one of the issues that you've kind of thought about, contended with over the years. But from your perspective, can you talk about why, or if you think this moment is pretty critical in terms of the future of privacy and privacy legislation in terms of the internet?
Well, there's a kind of a practical answer to that question that I want to start with. There's some very important politics that I'm excited about as well. But from a practical perspective, I think we're actually at the beginning of the really important privacy issues, because what we see today is that the people are using the internet, as you say, in so many different aspects of their lives. Some recent survey data that my colleagues at Trusted Future did show that half of the country is using mobile apps or other kinds of digital services to track their health. A third of the country is using those same services to monitor critical health status, like to detect whether they might have a heart condition or not, to manage their diabetes, et cetera. So, and of course, Senator Wyden mentioned the emphasis on reproductive rights as well. So I think that in the past, what we've worried about in the commercial privacy arena has essentially been about advertising and profiling, and those are important issues. But now we're at a whole other level where we really have to make sure that there's strong privacy protection for these very personal, very sensitive kind of uses of data. And I'm excited from a political perspective. You know, we have bipartisan support now for the ADPPA, the comprehensive privacy legislation. I was in the Obama administration, 2009 to 12, and we tried very hard to pass a consumer privacy bill of rights. The politics wasn't quite there for a whole variety of reasons. But I'm excited to see Congress on a bipartisan basis really advancing that legislation. If it doesn't get done this Congress, I think it's set up very well for next Congress. And as the senator said, these are just fundamental issues of individual liberty. They're not partisan questions. They're really about whether we're going to empower people and make sure people feel comfortable using this new technology.
I want to get to what is on the horizon, but before I do, I want to ask you one other question, which is about China and just bad actors when it comes to data. What do you think policymakers should be thinking about when it comes to this type of legislation? And are there better practices that tech companies themselves could be proactively doing?
Yeah. You know, we've seen such a shift in China from a view that we should engage somehow, and that would bring us all together into a more positive world. And we're now obviously in a more adversarial and competitive posture. I believe, big picture, the way that we do well vis-a-vis China is to be as competitive and innovative as we possibly can domestically. To me, the real question is, do we maintain our strong global position in the development of new technologies and new services? And by the way, that's not only a technical question. I think that's also very fundamentally a question of governing these technologies according to humane, democratic principles that respect human rights. I believe that remains a selling point for internet services that come from the free world, if you will. Obviously, there are security questions we have to worry about. I see this from the perspective of a university campus. We have lots and lots of Chinese students coming to our campus, and I hope we will be able to continue that, because I think that's the way we build a more positive view of the world. We obviously have to be careful about protecting very sensitive technology, but we're going to win on offense here, not on defense. We're not going to win in the global marketplace by just restraining China. We're going to win by doing better. So I think passage of the CHIPS Plus Act and things like that are super important.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the kind of the proactive. We'll leave on this note, which is, as we've talked about with both the senator and you just mentioned the CHIPS Plus Act this year. What legislation do you look to in the next year? We're in a divided Washington. A lot less is likely to get done. With that dynamic, do you think the government should be looking to do that we should be looking as potentially bright spots in this area?
I do look to privacy legislation in the coming Congress. Right now, Europe is really leading the democratic world on shaping the next era of privacy protection. And that's going to feed right into the models that we have for regulation of artificial intelligence and other data intensive services. So I think it's a critical national security priority, geostrategic priority for us to reclaim the mantle of strong privacy protection, because we actually agree with Europe for the most part on the privacy principles that matter, but we don't want to end up in a situation where all of the interpretation of those principles, all the application of those principles are done in Brussels as opposed to Washington. Europe has to govern itself, of course, and I think they've set a very positive example in many ways. But we have to step up and make sure that these new services that we're developing are developed with these democratic privacy preserving principles. That's what's going to give us global competitiveness in the long run.
All right, Danny. Well, we will leave it there. Thank you so much for your time this morning. And a big thank you to Senator Wyden and his team for getting him to join us this morning, and to Trusted Future for partnering with us for this 3-part series on trust in technology. This is our last event of 2022. A big thank you to the entire Punchbowl News team, including, of course, Morgan, who is our events manager and does all things events for us, and really has been helpful this year getting us through all of these events. We have a bunch more that we're already planning for 2023. You can check out the events hub at punchbowl.news. And of course, sign up for our free morning newsletter at punchbowl.news. Have a great day and stay safe.